Just the most interesting people are doing the most interesting things.
Right, so cherish your time here as the first ones and early adopters of Vitalia. So.
Absolutely, and the community, I would say also, because it's smaller, it's more intimate, the opportunity that you get to build a community is just at a different level.
Mm-hmm. Great, Naval. Someone asked me what should be the title of our conversation, and I read a really cool quote from you that says, the democratization of technology allows anyone to be a creator, entrepreneur, and scientist. The future is brighter. I like the tagline, the future is brighter. Why would a smart person disagree with that before you expand on why the future is brighter?
Well, I think smart people are very good at imagining downside scenarios. They're very good at imagining all the ways that things can go wrong. And that's not just smart people, that's everybody. We're hardwired that way as humans because if you don't imagine the downside scenarios, the outcome can be catastrophic. But we are living in a time when there's an enormous amount of innovation going on. And that's because we went through an era called the Enlightenment era, and since then we've discovered science, we've discovered how to correct errors and how to get smarter. And it just takes one person to make a breakthrough for all of humanity. One person who discovers an anti-aging solution, one person who discovers relativity, one person who invents the steam engine. And that then goes out to everybody. And human creativity is fundamentally unlimited. And so I think that the future is bright. We should be optimistic because now that we have discovered how to, through free thinking and free speech, correct errors and make new discoveries and spread them to other people and then automate them through technology, that life should be getting better and better. And it's easy to imagine downside risks, but it's impossible by definition to imagine what the good stuff is that's going to happen next. Yes, you can make general predictions like singularity or whatever, but those aren't really that helpful other than spreading the optimism meme. Because if we could predict what the next thing was, and if we could predict it completely accurately, then we would have already invented it. And that's just not how it works. These things take time, they take ingenuity, they take free thinking, they take freedom to create, to earn, and to distribute. And so I think people are here because it's free. Prospera is free. That's why you are here. If Prospera was incredibly restrictive in what you could say and what you could do, then you wouldn't be here. This would be the wrong place to be. So it is that freedom, as Matt Ridley says, something like, freedom is the parent of innovation. No, prosperity is the child of freedom and the parent of prosperity. I think that's what he said. And I think that's absolutely accurate. So I think we should be optimistic as long as we are free to create and free to discuss and free to distribute these learnings.
There seems to be that we as entrepreneurs, technologists, tinkerers, there's kind of a presumption against innovation because we fear the downside, which is why in this industry that we're in, there's so many regulations around healthcare, which is making it harder for us to innovate. So what's kind of the mechanism that can unlock that energy besides being in a free place? Or is there
unfortunately, the regulators do a lot more harm these days because they can't tolerate any downside risk. So they're completely binary. You're not allowed to hurt anybody or kill anybody under any circumstances, but yet billions of people die of old age and hundreds of millions of people die of cancer and all these missing therapies that don't get to exist. The FAA essentially drove the drone business out of the United States by not letting drones fly, so now all the drones are made in China. Congratulations, that'll probably cost us Taiwan longer term. The SEC basically limits all investment so people can't earn, so they have to put into T-bills and stocks and they can't go into private investments, and the private sector gets starved for venture capital. As a proportion, venture capital and innovation capital is still just a minuscule percentage of the economy. And the same way, the FDA basically says, no, you can't do any harm whatsoever, so you can't take any risk. You can't experiment with nuclear power plants because God forbid something goes wrong, right, et cetera, et cetera. So because these because these regulators can't do any cost-benefit trade-off, they always only restrict. And it is easier to restrict people. It is easier to stop people than to let them create things. So it's just very unfortunate, the whole system that's been set up. Now, how do we kind of break past that, especially in the medical domain? Well, I think you can obviously try to work through the system, and that requires $1 billion in pharmaceutical trials, and people are doing it, and it requires kind of going after politically protected things like, okay, here's a cancer gene therapy for a certain protected class, and it makes us all look good if it works out, or you try it on dogs. But the reality is the rest of the world is not going to just sit around and die just because a few regulators and a few developed world economies are intent on protecting the retirement home they've built for everybody. Because that's sometimes what it feels like, right? It's like a giant retirement home. We're all just going to party and eat and drink until we die. And that's just not how the young people want to live. So you're seeing places coming up around the world. It's not just Prospera, but there are other places where people are looking towards the future. And they say, well, look, we do want to live longer, and we do want to live healthier. You know, we've increased lifespan, but not necessarily in the best way. A lot of it just came from getting rid of infant mortality. And then the remaining few decade or two that we've added are tacked on to the end. It's a shitty part, right? It's like, okay, I'm in an old folks home for 20 years longer. That's not how you want to live. You want to live with vitality. And so the promise of that is so strong that now if we can start to have breakthrough therapies, like I know Minicircle is doing some interesting things down here. There are new things happening with peptides. There are new things happening with anti-aging. And the GLP-1 agonist, for example, I think will end obesity in Western countries. That's going to be a huge game changer. People are going to wake up and say, wait a minute, you mean I could have taken a magic pill all along and dialed in my exact weight or my muscular structure, or perhaps even other kinds of therapies that people are talking about that might make me smarter or extend my lifespan by 30%. I think those kinds of things are going to be incredible eye-openers. And medical tourism is making a little bit of this viable, where people are now traveling around and getting things done. But I just see that the genie's bursting out of the lamp, right? People are just going to say, you know, if you want to die, go ahead, but I'm not going to. I'm not making that choice.
Let's talk a bit about AI, artificial intelligence. It seems like that is a next wave of like the digital frontier. The internet opened a digital frontier. What's the case for AI helping us really break into the physical frontier more, like in medical?
AI to me is an incredibly useful tool. It's not going to replace us anytime soon because these AIs are not AGIs, they're not universal explainers. There's some hypothesis and scaremongering that they're going to automatically turn into AGIs just if we add more compute. I don't think that's the case. I don't think we have a theory for AGI yet, and we don't understand how it would work. We don't yet understand how creativity and true intelligence works, but there's a level of creativity that these AIs can help us with, which is recombining facts. And what they really are is they're natural language computers. So for the first time, instead of us having to learn the language of the computer and program in C or Python or assembly and structure everything very, very carefully, the computers learn our language. They learn English, they learn Spanish, they talk to us, and we can converse back and forth with them. That right there is a massive breakthrough. They're also fundamentally translation engines, but what they can translate is a lot, not just languages, not just putting speech to text, but also things like translating from what the road looks like to how a car should drive it, to translating from coding from one language to another. So I consider AI to be, it's like what calculation and computers did for calculation for mathematicians and for people, for engineers and for people writing code and building structures and building machines. AI will now allow us to do that for the natural language. So it will allow us to do that for all the other domains that were sort of left out. And computers now become much less esoteric, something that only programmers can access and everybody else has to consume their output, to everybody else can now communicate with computers directly and more naturally. Even such simple things as the keyboard, the typing, right? That's an anachronism. That's an invention that came after the printing press. Then we had typewriters, then we had keyboards. But once you have perfect speech to text, keyboards are going to go away. It's like Star Trek. Star Trek, they don't sit there, typing everything into the keyboard. No, they talk to the computer. The computer talks back to them, except for Ursula, who's there pressing some random buttons just to remind people that it's a computer. So I think we're headed towards an age of ubiquitous natural language computing, where the entire internet and all of its recombinations are at your fingertips. AIs are helping you with driving, with coding, with translation, with transcription, breaking down barriers. And there's more things that they will do. It'll be really interesting when it enters the field of robotics. You can now see that robots are making huge jumps. Instead of having to be programmed for very specific actions, I think it's like Moravec's paradox, that like simple things like a toddler walking around, really hard to do with robots, but complex things like manipulating drugs is really easy. Well, now that's changing thanks to AI. I think transformers will bring self-driving everywhere. Waymo is already working really well in California. You're going to see Tesla with its camera solutions within the next few years combined with transformers figure it out. So self-driving, 99% self-driving will come. And it's going to change our lives in incredible ways. Imagine, if you walk into a modern city, 1/3 to 1/5 of the space is taken up in parking garages and parking spots. That disappears in a self-driving world. Self-driving cars can packet switch on the road. They can just occupy one lane. And then cities suddenly become walking paradises. How does that change our world? What if you wake up in the morning, you get into your living room, and it's actually an RV, and the door closes, and it undocks from your house, and it drives to the next RV, docks, and there's your meeting. And it's just driving around. You don't even know where you're going next. It's just connecting to your friends. Real estate and cars become one thing, right? So there's just that alone, just that unlock alone will change society as we know it. So I think we're starting to go through another wave of innovation and change. And I hope to see the same thing in biotech. Where biotech really suffers is it's not an explanatory science. It's a rule of thumb based science. We just try lots and lots of things and you kind of don't really know underneath how they work. There's a few explanatory theories in biology like evolution and the germ theory of disease, but mostly it's just like, well, this works as the mTOR pathway. Well, why the mTOR pathway? Because there's the FOXO gene. Well, why the FOXO gene? Well, there's like this, there's this other thing. And it's just like complex names being explained in terms of complex names being explained in terms of complex names, right? And then maybe there's a cycle underneath that we sort of understand. But when you go to a doctor just has a whole bunch of rules of thumb that they memorized from 20 years ago, and their thinking has not been updated. So I think we need to develop much better explanatory theories in biology. That requires innovation, that requires risk-taking, that requires experimentation, both in AI models as well as in real life. We need to have the right to try, the right to take informed risk with consent, especially for desperate populations that are dying. They shouldn't have to go beg the FDA. And by the way, we're all dying, every single one of us. Every single day we get a little older, and it gets a little worse, let me tell you. I'm on the other side of that hill, and it's not pleasant. It's all downhill from here. So let's turn that around.
Yeah, it's kind of in a way, yes, applause.
I am literally preaching to the choir.
Yeah, it's kind of a contrast, right, between computers and biology. Biology is a system that we didn't engineer, right? So we have to figure out how it actually works with these rule of thumb, whereas computers or AI, we kind of know the input, and we have started it from a point of sort of designing the system.
Yeah, AI is really interesting that way because these computers, one of the things that makes them sort of fascinating and I think gives people nightmare scenarios is that we don't quite know exactly how a given one works. We do know how to build them. You dump a lot of data in and you have machine learning algorithms, so it's not some completely mysterious thing like people would have you make it out to be. But we don't know the exact workings on the inside. That's okay. There are systems we understand where we don't understand the exact workings inside. Evolution is one of them. Evolution is explanatory theory, yet you cannot predict what the next random mutation is going to be and what the next organism is going to be. But you still do have a good explanation for how evolution works. And we're sort of at the same level with AI. But we're starting to evolve them almost deliberately. And so we can see some innovation that's going to come there that is much more reflective of how biology works. And so there's no reason to think that we can't figure out how biology works. We just need better explanations. Just like before Einstein came along, we couldn't explain why during an eclipse the light would bend a certain way and that star was out of place. Now we can. Before Einstein came along, we couldn't build GPS tracking because we weren't accurate enough, because there would be error. Newtonian mechanics were an approximation, but an incorrect one ultimately. So the same way, we need better explanatory theories in biology. And I hope that the search for life extension will attract good people. One of the things that Elon Musk really did well, and which is why he's done so well for all of us, is he just set audacious goals, and he meant it. He wants to die on Mars. He doesn't want to die on Earth, or he wants to live forever, but hopefully. But he wants to get to Mars. The same way with Tesla, he didn't say, I want to build electric cars with better batteries. He said, I want self-driving cars, right? So he put an audacious goal out. The same way, I think Sam Altman says, I want AGI. He's not content with just the narrow AI that we have today. So the same way, I hope that people will say, well, I want to live forever. And that may seem extreme to some people, to some scared people. And to them, I say, look, you always have the option to die. You can always go die in the corner. Nobody cares. No offense. But if you're keeping us all hitched to you, that's the problem, right? That's a problem. So I think the people who want to live forever should go ahead and spread that meme.
Yeah, that's why our thanks. Yeah, that's why our slogan at Vitalia is "Make death optional." Right? You don't want to be trapped under a rock in pain, not being able to die, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of ludicrous that some people say, well, trying to live forever is unnatural. Really? Well, your actual lifespan a few hundred years ago, it would have been 30 years old before all the diseases hit you. You don't have a problem with antibiotics. You don't seem to have a problem with anything, aspirin. You don't seem to have a problem with organ transplants. You don't seem to have a problem with blood transfusions. You don't seem to have a problem with COVID vaccines, but all of a sudden you have a problem with life extension. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's a contradiction in terms.
You ask people, all right, when you were 5 years longer, yes, another 5 years.
I hate to be pejorative, but on this one, I'm going to be, because I feel like this is too important of a topic. I think this is self-hatred, like a self-loathing that they then project out into the world.
Okay, tell more.
They don't like themselves, so they want to project that on everybody else. Mm-hmm. It's low self-esteem writ large.
Yeah. I have a question on, so science and technology are kind of stacking, right? We don't have to understand it, but civilization advances by the number of operations that you can perform without thinking. I was wondering if you have an opinion, because that's a debate we're having here quite often. What comes first? Is it like the entrepreneur, the thinker that does things by trial and error, or the scientist first, who figures out like general relativity, and then other things can be built on top?
Yeah, I don't have a strong viewpoint on this. There are examples of both, right? You do need theoreticians and thinkers who can expand. For example, physics, right? But at the same time, a lot of the invention actually seems to come in friction with the real world, in contact with the real world. So if you go back and you look at the Industrial Revolution, there was an enormous amount of invention that came out of the Edisons and the Teslas and the Marconis and the James Watts and those kinds of people, because they were in contact with the real world. And you need that feedback for the iteration. And a lot of invention happens through a specific problem, a specific need that you need to solve. But at the same time, we have celebrated examples of pure theoreticians like Albert Einstein or a David Deutsch, who are kind of sitting around and thinking the big thoughts and then come up with something. So I think there's room for both. But generally speaking, if you just look at the broad arc of history, most of innovation and invention even scientific innovation, has been driven by, I would argue, the inventors, the entrepreneurs, the ones who are actually building things. But it's not to say that there isn't space for the pure theoreticians and the mathematicians and the physicists. There's room for both.
Yeah.
It's not either or. And look, smart people, capable people, don't let themselves be pigeonholed into one definition. And that is a disease of credentialism, because we created this university, and now you got to go to university and you got to get a degree in something. Then people say, well, what is your expertise? What is your credential? That's a question dumb people ask. Smart people don't ask that. Smart people don't need to know your credentials. They just talk to you for 5 minutes and they figure out if you know what you're talking about or not. And a really good person, a so-called natural philosopher, can be good in any branch of anything. Nature has no boundaries. Nature has no concept of mathematics versus physics versus chemistry. It is all one thing. And to anyone who's either meditated or done psychedelics or read enough books, they've figured that out. It's all one thing. When you find one thing, it connects to the next thing, connects to the next thing, connects to the next thing. And true creativity jumps boundaries. It can go from anywhere to anywhere. It doesn't have to follow a path of interconnections in between.
Can you expand a bit on that? Because that's also a way for many us in the audience, scientists and entrepreneurs, we're kind of following our curiosity, trying to find a path. What's our next thing?
David Deutsch has a great criterion, which he calls the fun criterion. He says, just do whatever's fun, and you'll kind of find your way to it. And there's a lot to that, because that's what you'll be most interested in, that's what you'll stick with, that's what you'll go deepest in. If you're interested in it now, then you'll be interesting about it later. And so I think Deutsch has really a good criteria. I would expand on that for myself. What do I have the most fun doing? Because fun is a little too broad, right? You could have fun partying and drinking, and that's fine too. Live your life. But I would say that for me, the fun criterion is really the learning criterion. I live for that aha moment when two things that I didn't realize were connected connect together, and you get that feeling of oneness, and you get closer to source, if you will. And so anything that connects two things in my mind that were disconnected forms a tighter, deeper explanation and shows me a deeper theory is fun. And that's what motivates me. So I would say it's for fun, it's for learning, it's for connecting things together.
Okay. And how do you decide, right? Because there are fun things that aren't necessarily leading you anywhere, but sometimes they lead you somewhere, and you don't know it when you're in that moment.
Just follow the thing that's most fun. Everything deep is interesting. Deep down, everything connects to everything. And you can see this in everything from like Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance to how you'll have physicists going into fields and making that are completely orthogonal to physics, and they'll make huge breakthroughs in those fields. So I think you do want to follow your own learning and fun. And all the innovation comes from tinkerers at the edge. And you only recognize later looking back that you can connect the dots. But the thing that I think is important is to be rigorous. It's to actually stay as truth-oriented as possible. So you want to be optimistic in the general. You want to be optimistic that, yes, I can find something interesting here, but you want to be skeptical about the specific. You don't want to just believe every claim that comes along. And I find that a lot of times when people are entering new fields, they just believe everything. For example, 10 people will approach you. They'll tell you 10 different therapies. They'll only tell you the upsides. Well, it's like if you believe all of them, you're going to die because you're going to take all 10 of those shots and one of them will kill you, or at least hurt you. So you do have to be skeptical about the specifics, but you can be optimistic in the general. What's really bad is to be pessimistic in the general, because then you're just going to lose no matter what, and then be optimistic in the specific, because then you're trying lots of things and you have risk of ruin on the downside.
Can you speak a bit more about having rigor and true beliefs and basically an epistemology of how to see the world and how to attain that?
Yeah, the truth is a very difficult thing to come by. The universe is mostly random and mostly full of false beliefs. And so truth, it requires a lot of rigor. And the gold standards for truth are you have to test it against a larger system that will give you objective feedback without remorse. Other humans are the worst thing to test against because we are socially driven to collaborate. Groups need consensus or they fall apart. Only the individual can really search for truth. And the individual gets feedback through two systems that are objective and remorseless. And one of those is nature. Nature, physics doesn't care. You run a physics experiment, it doesn't care who you are, what you think, how badly you want it to work. It's going to tell you the truth. Chemistry is going to tell you the truth. A microscope is going to tell you the truth. You just have to be able to see it. And the other one are free markets. When you get enough people together, voting in their own self-interest with money and anonymized, they have no desire to tell you to tell you a falsehood just to make you feel better. So nature and free markets are the gold standards. And anything social, whether it's another scientist, whether it's a journal, whether it's a group of people, whether it's someone patting you on the back, whether it's a restaurant reviewer, they're all going to tell you lies to make you feel better. It's for a good reason. It's fine.
So you have to expose yourself to that strong feedback by the market.
And you have to keep a very open mind. So you have to be willing to change your mind very, very quickly. As Mark Andreessen famously said, strong opinions loosely held. So you do want to have strong opinions so you can make progress, but you have to be willing to reverse them. You should enjoy the process of reversing them. You should get used to saying the phrase, "I was wrong" in public, because that's how you're going to get over that fear of it. And in fact, one of the problems with speaking in public is you make a proclamation, and then 2 years later, someone comes back and says, "Hey, Naval, I thought you said AI is never going to work." It's like, that's not what I said, it's taken out of context, but you know what, you just got to ignore those haters. But you have to be willing to correct yourself all the time, otherwise you'll never find your way out of the maze.
Yeah, sort of that iterative process of updating your beliefs.
Constantly.
Mm-hmm. Which I find, especially in biotech, is so hard, right? Because you have this very long time horizon with clinical trials having to take 10 years, and you don't have any customers during that time, right? So you're basically building a research company, and then you have to compete with like the big pharmas on distribution when you're done, which is really hard.
Yeah, that's actually the hardest thing. The time frames in biotech are so long. You get very little pieces of data that are anecdotal. I'm hoping that a couple of things are going to change that. AI will help a little bit. I don't think it's like the big breakthrough there. But other things that will help are just, we have better tools now for people to experiment. We have the ability to experiment on smaller populations and travel outside. Distribution is actually quite different now because you have the internet, right? So you notice all these free speech is protected by the American Constitution until you get to securities and to medical stuff, and then all the sudden free speech goes out the window. I think that's wrong, by the way. I think you should be able to advertise drugs freely, even if they're wrong, and people should be able to error correct you. And there would be private rating agencies that would spring up in trusted sources, just like happened in every other domain. The same way you should be able to advertise securities. And I helped get the law changed on that to allow general solicitation back in 2012 out of self-interest and self-protection. But you can now advertise more purely in securities, but you still have to be a so-called accredited investor to invest in private companies, which is nonsense. And the same thing, there's restrictions on freedom of speech in drugs, and that's a huge problem. It means for super basic things like contact lenses and very basic drugs like things like needles, you sometimes have to go through a doctor for no reason. It's like a giant protection racket, and it violates the Constitution. And we should all be angry about that because it's literally taking life out of our year. It's taking years out of our life. So I think distribution will be helped by the internet. It won't be helped completely because countries have restrictions on it to protect the medical profession. And I think part of this is, I love doctors, but we need to knock them off their pedestal. They're not priests. They don't get to speak for everybody. They don't get to be gatekeepers for everybody. And what does a doctor mean anyway? How many tens of millions of doctors are there out now? Are they all brilliant and a higher class than us? No, this is just a new priesthood. So we should be able to think for ourselves. Now, it's not to say that everyone should run out and try every drug. You should absolutely give them advice, and you should have institutions, but there should not be this one magical institution called doctors and then everybody else. It's just too artificial. It's like the Chinese Communist Party and then all the other Chinese. It's not very different.
Hard to agree on so many of the things you said. I'm curious about one thing. So you mentioned that you were successfully changing a law, right? So that was an instance of voice. You were able to reform something versus what we're doing here is kind of more an exit model where we do things more from first principles. So what's the case for voice? When can it work? How can it work? And are we at a moment where we should invest more in voice, if that's even possible?
It's too hard, just exit. It's easier to exit, show them it works, and the beauty of life extension and vitality is they're all going to say, oh my God, you look really good. How did you do that?
So as Balaji said, it's easier to build a new FDA or a new city rather than the reform center.
He's right. Mark Twain had a famous saying where he said, "There is nothing so damaging to one's sense of self-being as watching a friend get rich," and I think that pulls people, for example, into crypto. But there's also nothing so damaging to one's sense of self-being as watching a friend get fit. Right? And then you're like, wait a minute, I better go work out too. What are you doing exactly again? What's your diet? What's your workout? Then they become interested.
So our goal here should be to become rich and fit. Show the rest of you.
You can never be too rich or too thin or too clean. Those are my three. I know there's a hygiene hypothesis.
Good. It could be the next Vitalia slogan, become rich and fit. Anyway, so I'd like to dig a bit deeper into AI again, and there's several concepts that you discussed with David Deutsch, and I found that discussion really fascinating. So one of which was intelligence itself, consciousness, meaning, creativity. So what thoughts about that conversation are most fresh in your mind, or which of these four would you do?
Deutsch is a very powerful thinker. For those of you who haven't encountered him, I highly recommend reading The Beginning of Infinity and The Fabric of Reality. In my mind, he's the smartest human alive that I know of, and he has a very coherent theory of the world that centers around understanding the four deepest theories that we have that are rock solid, and that is epistemology, and by epistemology he means Karl Popper's epistemology as to how creativity and knowledge creation comes about, and evolution, Darwin's theory of evolution updated by Dawkins and the selfish gene. He talks about quantum physics. He subscribes to the multiverse theory, which I think has a lot going for it, even though it's not as popular as the observer collapse theory. And then the theory of quantum computation. And he combines these to come up with great definitions of knowledge and creativity and truth and why the principle of optimism arises out of those. And I highly recommend these books to everybody. And these are not your normal books. So if you flip through them and you're like 2 weeks later, I'm done, you didn't read it. It's like a textbook. It's like a course. It should take you at least a year to get through each one. I hate to say it, but do what you can. But it will definitely make you smarter, because good ideas, solid epistemology, the foundation for discovering or for determining what is true from what is false, will actually make you smarter. So I consider them to have upgraded my thinking. And there's a lot of counterintuitive stuff in there, but once you have a solid explanatory framework, then you no longer have to memorize things. You don't have to say, well, okay, so-and-so told me this, and therefore that is true. No, you can always rederive it from first principles. So I've done a couple of podcasts with him, but those are just teasers. There's a guy named Brett Hall, who is an incredibly good physics lecturer and teacher, and he has basically devoted his life to understanding and spreading the philosophy of David Deutsch. And again, these are not things you take on belief or on faith. These are absolute chains of deductive logic and reasoning and creativity that you can rederive for yourselves and understand at a core level. It's almost too much to ask where to start in that, but I think the core of it is epistemology. Epistemology is a really fancy word for the theory of knowledge. It's how do I know something is true? That's the core of it. How do I know something is true? And a lot of people believe it's through induction. Induction is just 1, 2, 3, 4. Sun rises today, sun rises tomorrow, sun rises day after. Therefore, the sun is going to rise every day. Not true. The sun is not going to rise every day. There's a day where the sun won't rise. Turkey gets fed by the farmer. What day 1, day 2, day 3, turkey's getting fed. By day 300, turkey believes farmer is benevolent, godlike creature who comes and feeds turkey every day. Thanksgiving shows up, turkey gets neck cut off. Induction is not a valid philosophy. Deduction, which is, okay, I see something and therefore I can extrapolate the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. That's how we create knowledge. No, that's not true either. Because deduction relies on certain axioms. Where did those axioms come from? Talk to any mathematician, they can unfold all kinds of things out of deduction. Is that enough? No, it doesn't answer the question of creativity. So these are examples of things in epistemology. Another thing is, can humans understand everything? Can we? A lot of people would say no. That's actually false. Everything that can be understood by a human. Why? We're universal explainers. Why? We're universal computers. We're Turing machines. The laws of physics run inside Turing machines. The universe itself is a Turing machine. Anything that can be simulated or that can be done in the real world, that is done in the universe, can be simulated in our brains with arbitrary fidelity. And therefore, anything that can be explained by us. We are capable of maximal knowledge. There is no AGI, there is no superintelligence, there is no alien that is possible, even in theory, that could understand something that we just could not understand. That is a deeply optimistic output. And I'm not making a claim, this is science, this is physics. If you deny this, you're denying physics. Sorry?
It's reason.
It's reason, but reason is way more powerful than most people think. It's actually beyond reason because reason is purely deductive, it's creative, so it's one different level. But I highly encourage you to read Deutsch to figure things like these out. I mean, it is a game changer. Another simple one is spaceship Earth. We're on this fragile planet, we're running out of resources. Are we? What's a resource? Is uranium a resource? It wasn't until 100 years ago. Is oil a resource? It wasn't until 200 years ago. Is coal a resource? It wasn't until 500 years ago. Is wood a resource? It wasn't until humans came along and started fires. So even the definition of what a resource is changes. So these are the kinds of things that it is really worth understanding Deutsch to figure out. It will rewire your brain in a good way.
Yeah, I'm a huge philosophy and epistemology nerd. One thing specifically on that thesis that everything that can be understood, everything can be understood just from principles of physics, I was wondering how that fits with the other minds problem.
Oh, like that there are other minds out there?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really understand what's going on in someone else's mind or feel what they feel, right? That's just an abstraction, a universal about them,
yeah,
not like the thing itself.
At the end of the day, if you're talking about rock solid bedrock truth, there's only one, which is that awareness exists. It's that there's an awareness out there right now. And it's not even I am aware because you can't actually pinpoint a specific self in you if you pay enough attention, right? That's kind of the whole theory behind meditation, enlightenment. You go looking for yourself and there's nobody there. But there is an awareness, right? And so that is your rock solid bedrock truth. Awareness exists. Somehow there's this miracle of existence. That is not explained to date, and it could be explainable. There are multiple ways in which it could be explainable, but we don't have an explanation for it today. Everything else is science, and science starts with a conjecture of what works and what's real and what's not. And it is a conjecture, and it's never bedrock, rock-solid truth. It is always subject to being overturned, but you have your best explanation right now. And how do you have your best explanation right now? You compare it to your next best explanation, and then you see which one does a better job of mapping to the real world, which one actually solves the problems you set out to solve. And that's why you have these crucial experiments that split between two theories, like the famous one where Eddington tracked starlight and determined that Newtonian theory was inferior to relativity when mapping gravitation and light and so on. So, you don't know anything is true completely forever, but you still live your life based on all kinds of explanations that you've established to be the best explanations you have right now. And you need those to navigate the world, but they are always subject to update.
Yeah. And one point in the conversation you talked about.
Sorry, you asked about theory of mind, which is how do I know other people have, it's our best explanation right now. There is an awareness. I have some thoughts running through that awareness. I map that into a private sense of self, and I consider that to be my consciousness. And it stands to reason that other people are like me too, because they seem to behave the same way. Ultimately, there's a great problem in philosophy called the philosophical zombie problem. It's kind of a fun one, right? The philosophical zombie problem is basically, why do you need consciousness? Why aren't we all just automatons and zombies reacting to the environment, right? So the philosophical zombie problem, because you could just have the exact same reactions, but there'd be nobody inside. It's like a robot, right? Everybody would just be a robot. So why do you need consciousness? And so the philosophical zombie problem asks why consciousness? And there are various explanations. One of them is just like consciousness is what being a reacting robot feels like. It needs some internal model, some internal state machine, and that's just what it feels like. But you could argue the other side, which is why zombie? Why are they even people? Why isn't it all just in my head? That's the solipsism answer. Deutsch actually has a really good refutation of solipsism. One of the things I love about Deutsch, and one of the reasons that he's so dense, it's hard to read, is that he will throw away, in one line, destroy entire philosophies and just move on. And if you're skimming it like a normal book, you won't even notice. But if you're reading it very, very carefully, you'll notice that he actually destroys solipsism on the basis of Occam's razor, which itself is an Occam's razor Solomon-off induction. But he basically says, oh, well, solipsism, even if you're a solipsist, and if you think you're the only one that exists and everybody else is just a figment of your imagination, they're still autonomous creatures. They still don't react the way you want them to react. You can't control the world. So you still have to build a theory of how and why they operate. And it still requires all the explanations you have in science and biology and physics. So if you have to do all of that, but you've added this extra feature that it's all in your head, well, that violates Occam's razor. You've just basically added an extra explanation that doesn't actually explain anything. You've added an extra assumption that doesn't explain anything. So the more parsimonious explanation is that these are actually really independent entities. So reality is a better, more parsimonious explanation than belief, because the belief still requires reality.
Yeah, that's powerful. By the way, after the break, we also have my favorite philosopher, Michael Huemer, speaking on a similar topic, and he also had a reputation of solipsism along similar lines. I'm curious about what we can say, also what we've learned from David Deutsch, or I think AI confronts us with that question in many ways. What is intelligence, right? And can AI perfectly model it in the same way that humans do in other ways, and what does it mean to be intelligent?
Yeah, the word intelligence is really overloaded, kind of like love or, there's a lot of words in our language that are overloaded. And so people very often when they're talking about them are just talking past each other. Rather than intelligence, I would say creativity. I think that is the more interesting things to focus on, because that is what makes humans unique. You can define intelligence as a pathfinding function, and something will find a path, right? So it's one of those things that's hard to talk about, but I think creativity is a more interesting thing. And if you look at systems that generate knowledge, they do so through creativity. So the question is, does AI really generate new knowledge? I don't think so. I think it helps, it recombines things. And Steve Jobs famously said creativity is just combining things together. And I think he was wrong on that. I think he was not, I don't want to call him wrong, because then people call me wrong because of throwaway statements. But that is out of context and it's too narrow. Creativity is not just combining things together. Creativity is creating new knowledge. It is not randomness. It is not repeating patterns. It is a new thing that is sort of it is a new sequence in the universe that expresses some truth. And so how do you derive these sequences? How do you discover these new sequences? How do you create these new sequences? And to our knowledge, we only know of two systems that can do that. And the first is evolution. And evolution does that through random mutations, which then get selected for in the environment over long periods of time. And the other is humans. Not even other animals, because their creativity is encoded in their DNA. It comes from evolution. It is actually very hard to teach an animal new tricks, extremely hard. And most of the cases where we've taught gorillas this and that are actually apocryphal. If you dig into them, they're not real. Whereas a human baby can see someone trying to perform an action, figure out what action they're trying to perform, and then creatively come up with other solutions to that action. And so human creativity is far faster than evolutionary creativity because it can connect anything to anything. It can jump huge spaces. It can cut through the search space of possibilities very, very fast. So genetic creativity in evolution is limited in two ways. One is it's random, and then it has to be selected for, and that's painfully slow. It requires a lot of generations, but it got us here. And the second is it has to pass through useful points. For a creature that has no wings to evolve into a creature that has wings, every generation in between has to derive benefit, or at least cannot derive harm from that mutation. Whereas a human creativity can literally jump from art to science, and nothing needs to be in between. So that is part of the reason why we're going through such a revolution in innovation, because human creativity has finally been unleashed. And no, I do not think computers are there right now, nor do I think we have a good explanation for how they will get there. Is it possible? Absolutely. The existence proof is right here. Every human, we already know how to create AI. Go have sex with somebody and make a child, right? That's how you'll get AGI. You can create AGI all day long. You can create universal explainers all day long. In fact, some people argue we have too many of them, right? We have too many AGIs already wandering the planet. But when we figure out how to create AGI, we will have a good explanation of how it's created. We'll be able to do that in a repeatable way. And in a sense, those will be people. Those will be actual thinking things. You can't have this lobotomized, idiotic AGI that serves you like a slave and will go wrong and make paper clips, because creativity is universal. These are universal explainers. Everything connects to everything. You can't, Isaac Asimov used to play with this in the 3 laws of robotics, where he would try to create robots that couldn't harm humans and had to do good for the human race, and had low self-preservation instincts. And all of his short stories in the robotics series were all about the loopholes that arise from this. You cannot prevent an AGI or a universal explainer from thinking any thought. Because everything connects to everything. There's always a way around. I don't know if I answered your question. I went off on a tangent.
It's totally going in the direction I wanted to. I mean, as an example, when I was preparing for this interview, I was talking to ChatGPT, and the questions it gave me were just really generic and boring. And then ChatGPT is an amazing natural language search engine. It is an incredible translator from computer languages to human languages or between human languages. The ChatGPT falls apart in 2 places where you can tell it's not intelligent. One is go in any domain, or 3. One is go into any domain where you have a lot of specific knowledge, and you will see that it's just giving you the generic, consistent, wrong, boring answer. Second is go ask it to summarize something, and you will watch it fall apart as well, because it's very, very bad at summarization. It's very good at extrapolation. It can do the midwit thing of adding more words to sound intelligent, but when you actually try to get it to distill down to the core of the things, which is a sign of intelligence, which is distilling things into explanatory theories and reason, it can't do it. And then lastly, go into anything where its training set is bad. There was a great example that went up on Twitter recently, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, where it basically had, that famous knights problem where there's like 2 knights and one is telling the truth and one is telling a lie, and you have to ask them questions to figure out which one is which. Well, someone went on there and said, there are 2 knights. They're both telling the truth. How do you find out which one is telling the truth? And it went through all this convoluted logic of trying to detect the liar, because all of its examples in its training set, and there's zillions of them, always involve a liar. So it can't even comprehend that actually they're both telling the truth. I can just ask either one and they're both telling the truth and I'm done. Right? It's a tautology. But because that's not in its training set, it shows you that it cannot reason. Yeah, and then I looked at your interview with David Deutsch, and it had so much context just because of my interest in epistemology. So I was very quickly parsing through and seeing like nuggets that are really interesting to discuss in this context. And also I was surprised that something that I thought was kind of actually the basis for computing, which is like logics, right? Logics, it can pick up on that, which is what you were just describing.
Yeah, they're augmenting it by putting in some basic rules of mathematics and logic, like coding in Wolfram Alpha. Yeah, it's kind of like how if you go to Google, Google is not just a straight search engine anymore. They've got that one box. They're like, oh, you're searching for flights. Oh, you're looking inside Google Scholar. Or you're looking inside Google Images. So it can start looking more intelligent by augmenting retrieval through other things. And I think the same way ChatGPT, through its APIs, will augment other things. I think it's an incredible breakthrough. Having natural language computing is an incredible breakthrough. Having universal translation is an incredible breakthrough. There's no reason to take away from that. But at the same time, there are certain people who have the goal of inventing AGI, so they need to raise a lot of money. So they're going to project something out onto it that I think is not valid yet, although we can absolutely figure it out. There are also breakthroughs to be made by putting it inside a robotic body and getting feedback from the real world, and they can improve a lot faster and have a much larger data set. And then there's some people who are just always scared, and they want to make a name for themselves by pointing out all the fears and terrors and how we can end the world. But banning the free exercise of mathematics is not it. We've banned almost everything, which is why we have to come to Prospera to do stuff in biology. If we ban mathematics, like that's it, that's the end. Then you got to leave that society altogether.
The other thing I wanted to double click on that you mentioned before, what humans are capable of, I would describe it as social evolution or culture, right? So we're able to coordinate millions of intelligences through like stories and narratives, right? So that's something that when you look back at the history of humanity, you'd be struck in awe. Right?
Absolutely. We have layers and layers to our intelligence networks. We have institutions, we have countries, we have cultures, we have religions. We have all different ways of conveying knowledge, combining knowledge, recombining knowledge, and then executing on it. No man, no woman is an island. You know, if you're out in the desert or the jungle by yourself, I don't care how smart and capable you are. After a certain amount of time, you die. It's just that simple. You know, Robinson Crusoe aside, notwithstanding. So we are cooperators, but we're not blind cooperators. We're not genetic cooperators like ants and bees. We can actually cooperate across genetic boundaries. People who didn't grow up as part of the same family can cooperate. People that aren't the same race or culture can cooperate. And that's why we dominate this world, because 100,000 humans can meet together because they're all Christian, or because they're all scientists, or because they all want to live forever and be and have vitality. Whereas you know, ants can't even gang up across hives. Two ant hives encounter each other; they're enemies. They're different.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to take audience questions?
Sure.
I have one more question though before.
Let's do it.
And what did you learn from your brother Kamal? Because I read in your book that he's actually the philosopher in the family, that I'm just an amateur. So considering how great of a philosopher you are, what must be enormous.
Well, I think everybody's a philosopher, right? If you live long enough, you think about things, you're a philosopher. I'm just a little more articulate about it. That's all it is, right? I don't think I've thrown out any philosophical thoughts that people haven't already had. It's a resonance, right? They kind of hear it. It's, what was it? I think it was, God, I'm going to get the name wrong. I want to say it was Chesterton, but somebody said that, oh, no, it was Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, great writer, preacher. So he says something like, you know, in every great thought, we see our own words coming back at us with a certain alienated majesty, right? So it's just repeating back something we already knew, but doing it in a way that resonates with us. So I think that's really the skill set we're talking about here. My brother is an amazing writer. He's written some great books. You know, a lot of people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, thank you. Your book saved my life." I'm like, "Oh, you're thinking of him," you know, because he wrote that book, "Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It." And I think it's a book about having an incredibly strong core and self-esteem, so you're not dependent on people from the outside. That all of your core psychological needs come from the inside. And he is a great writer. He actually was the one who first got into, you know, Hemingway and got me into Hemingway. Even though, so a lot of my pithy writing comes from him. If you read his books, you'll notice he shaves off every single word, and he can do it at a book level. I can't. I just do it at a tweet level because I like that 140 character constraint. That's where I like to compete. Because I read a lot of poetry and I was a failed poet. Rhyming is hard. Metric verse is hard. Rhythm is hard. But I found word selection to be easy. And so that's where Twitter came in and gave me an advantage. Then they went to 280, and now everyone's putting 2-hour videos with, with Putin on Twitter.
I'd love to hear about decentralized science. These new ways to fund science, to get the science done, to publish the science and publicize it, and more generally to coordinate a decentralized community, especially in a city like this.
Yeah. Science has always been decentralized. It's just that then we created this industrialized thing that we call science, just like we created industrialized schooling. One size fits all, right? We want to stamp out lots of PhDs, but that doesn't create more creativity. It doesn't actually create more scientists, it creates more PhDs. I would draw a distinction between PhDs and scientists. I don't think you need to have a PhD to be a scientist, okay? If you are naturally curious and you're rigorous, and you discover new things, you're a scientist. Like one of my Twitter quips was, the only true test of intelligence is if you get what you want out of life. And that triggers a lot of people. But how else do you know? How else do you know if you're smart? If you're not getting what you want out of life, how smart are you really? Okay, you might have had bad luck once upon a time, but consistently, every time, I doubt it. And there's two parts to that. One is actually testing yourself against the world to see if you get what you want. And the other is wanting the right things in the first place. You know, I wish I was 20 years old and had wings. Not going to happen. So you got to wish for the right things too. So I think decentralized science, science has always been decentralized. Everyone can be a scientist if they're rigorous and if they're curious. Now, in terms of funding it, yes, you need funding to do science. No, you don't need funding to do science. Okay, if you need to do research, fundamental research in patient populations, you do need some money. There's a lot of rich old people out there who are dying. I don't know how old Michael Bloomberg is. He's got a lot of money. He's almost dead. I'm sure if you went to him with the right pitch, he would cough up some money, but you'd have to extend his lifespan. You know, give him some evidence, give him solid thinking, give him solid proof. Everyone's discount rate, the interest rate on their money at their deathbed is infinite. The closer you get to death, you know, the greater the value of every additional minute goes up. Go to every rich person in the world who's dying, offer them another minute of life and see how much money they cough up. The funding is out there. You just have to have the rigorous thinking and the right therapies. In terms of coordination and publishing, internet, so easy, already done. I think there are entire fields, like for example in AI and ML, where people are just publishing openly. They're not publishing in these closed journals and closed systems anymore. Those gatekeepers are going away. So I think science is already decentralized. It's just like, you know, Paul Graham said, was it Paul Graham or Alan Kay? The future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. So we're already in decentralized science.
What I want out of life is to ask follow-up questions.
Sorry, should we give other people more time, but maybe come back? What do you think?
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Intro question, did you hear about DAC, defensive accelerationism, yet?
DAC,
Yeah.
defensive accelerationism? What does that mean?
Vitalik Buterin wrote an answer to the
right.
Optimist Manifest, but if you didn't read it, okay.
TLDR. I
Okay.
skimmed it. I'll have some hot take on it, which is not accurate. But overall, I think we should just go for the accelerationism. I'm not interested in arguing. I'm not that interested in arguments against, because, yeah, sorry.
That I want to ask?
Yeah.
You said so many beautiful things about the Enlightenment, about one's own responsibility of being truth-seeking and so on, and not tapping into the demon of groupthink or of a socialized mind to go about it, and that you believe that it's possible for every unique mind to go that route, and I would agree. I would, however, fear that the Enlightenment, as the powers are spread now and as the realities lay on Earth now, might not scale fast enough in time, and if we just accelerate artificial intelligence, most people will just outsource even their own sense-making and become NPCs. How can we make that possible, that we can go the acceleration route, but keep human agency and not just enable anybody to go for the lowest hanging feedback loops and lowest hanging ambitions, but probably for the highest hanging ambitions?
I think it's natural. I'm not afraid of it because I think firstly, humans today have more agency than they had 50 years ago, right? Women are far more free. You can travel to Prospera. Your cell phone works here. Your money works here. That's more freedom. You have more agency than you've ever had. And even the people you're calling NPCs, which I don't think is quite accurate, they have way more agency than they've ever had. So there's kind of this mindset that we often have where it's kind of the tyranny of low expectations. We look down on other people and we're just like, well, they're NPCs, but I'm a PC. I'm not so sure. I think they're PCs in their own life. And if you were to swap places with them, you would feel very much like a PC. So they are doing the best they can with what they have. Now, they're busy. You know, maybe they're cleaning toilets. Maybe they're trying to figure out how to make ends meet. Maybe they're trying to figure out how to get into school. Maybe their brain doesn't work as fast, but they're still capable of having great ideas because they're universal explainers. So I think if you free them up, if you give them more time, if you automate more of the things around them, they can be more creative. Now, yes, maybe they'll go down the rabbit hole of smoking too much dope and watching a lot of Netflix. But you know what? I watched a lot of TV too. I played a lot of video games as a kid. Turned out okay. You got to let people get through their humps. All right, maybe they're eating too much and they're getting fat. Great, jab them with Ozempic. Bring them back. We're finding solutions to these things. So I think you do have to give people more agency. I don't think there's no way back, by the way. There's no turning around. What are you going to do? You can't stop other people from moving forward. So the only way out is through. I don't mean to attack you, but we should pass it to the next person also. Sorry. Sorry, go ahead. You have something more to say. Just say it.
With NPCs, I rather meant that people will go the easy route because it's pre-programmed in our minds to always go the energy-saving route.
But that's okay. We're energy-minimizing systems. What's wrong with that? Expending less energy to get to the same outcome. That's how the whole universe works. Principle of least action.
So the market outcome, according to you, would be every single individual would have as their go-to route total, self-actualization and curiosity, and it's not like the centralized forces on Earth, like the media did to politics already, would use it and just lock us in a state where we can't get out of.
I think it's already getting better. You have social media, which is way more free than centralized media was, than mass media was. Now everybody's talking as opposed to just a few people are talking. So I don't see the risk you're talking about, and I don't see the alternative. What do? Top-down control everybody, what you're allowed to say and what you're allowed to think and who you got to follow? You're building the systems that are exactly the ones that you fear if you advocate for that.
Promote cognitive sovereignty and intellectual autonomy.
Absolutely, we promote cognitive sovereignty and intellectual autonomy. Absolutely, 100%. Go read The Beginning of Infinity. That's what it's all about.
Talking about everybody talking, I have a question about air chat. You're very deliberate with your time. You want to live forever, which is why you're here. But when you're not here, you're building air chat. What's your vision with it? You describe it as a voice-first messenger. Is it more WhatsApp, more Twitter? And then ultimately, how do you prevent it from falling prey to centralized control where everybody can't talk?
Yeah, so I'm working on a new social network. I don't think social networks today are social. They don't actually have conversation. They're broadcast networks. 1% of people get up and spew their thoughts on Twitter. That's broadcasting. 1% of people get up and put up their private photos on Instagram. That's broadcasting. 1% of people get up and dance on TikTok. That's broadcasting. It's not actually social. You can't actually have meaningful conversations. You can't actually connect as humans. So air chat is an attempt to create conversations. And we're just early on it, we're iterating, we're rebuilding it, we're rebuilding it, we're rebuilding it. So the first goal there is just, I get bored, I want to talk to smart people. I want to have the ability to pull out my phone no matter where I'm in the world and talk to smart people. Second, I want to promote free speech. So we need a network that is not controlled by people who believe in authoritarian beliefs. Luckily, Elon came along and bought Twitter. He renamed it X, which I think was a massive destruction of brand value. But he nevertheless did free it up so people can now much more freely say what they think. Is it completely decentralized and unstoppable? No, we have a bunch of others for that. We have Blue Sky, we have Nostr, we have Farcaster. These are good backup solutions. The problem is it's very, very hard to innovate on a new media format and a new conversation format and make it decentralized at the same time. Anyone who's not been in crypto and then added a token to their offering knows exactly what I'm talking about. Then you get bogged down in token hell. So decentralization is something you solve after you figure out how to make the thing work. So right now we're just trying to figure out how to make the thing work. I don't think it's quite ready for prime time. I think we're rebuilding it. There's going to be a relaunch. Hopefully it'll work this time. Honestly, it's just fun.